The universe was vast and silent, except for the faint hum of stars burning in the distance. On a small, rocky planet circling a dim red dwarf star, a civilization was dying. The Valeth, translucent beings with shimmering bodies that reflected light like prisms, had lived on this world for thousands of years. But now their sun was collapsing, its energy fading faster than anyone had predicted. The air grew thinner every day, and the ground cracked under the strain of shifting tectonic plates. They knew they didn't have much time left. In desperation, the Valeth sent out a cry for help that pulsed across the void of space. It wasn't meant for just anyone. It was a plea to any species advanced enough to hear it and compassionate enough to respond. The message was simple. We are dying. Help us. But space is unpredictable, and signals can travel farther than intended. This one found its way into uncharted territory, bouncing off cosmic debris until it reached an unexpected destination. The signal was picked up by the Iron Gale, a massive warship belonging to the Deathworlder fleet. The Deathworlders were humans who had adapted to survive on planets so hostile that most species couldn't last more than a few hours there. Their homeworlds were filled with poisonous atmospheres, crushing gravity, and relentless predators. Over generations, they had become tough, resourceful, and fiercely independent. But their reputation wasn't built solely on survival skills. They were also known for being quick to anger, slow to trust. Commander Jack Monroe stood on the bridge of the Iron Gale, staring at the blinking lights on the communications panel. He was a tall man with sharp features and dark eyes that rarely showed emotion. His crew respected him because he made hard decisions without hesitation, but some wondered if he ever questioned those decisions later. Beside him stood Dr. Laura Bennett, a scientist whose curiosity often clashed with military protocol. She was younger than most senior officers, with curly brown hair tied back in a loose ponytail and glasses perched on her nose. "What do we have?" Monroe asked, his voice calm but firm. "It's unusual," Laura replied, leaning over the console. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen as she analyzed the data. "It's not from any known species. The language is completely unfamiliar, but..." She paused, squinting at the translation software. "There's a pattern here. Repetitive phrases. It seems like a distress call." Monroe frowned. "Distress call? From where?" Laura pointed to a holographic map projected above the table. A blinking dot marked the origin of the signal. "Out near the edge of Sector 7. That's deep in neutral territory. We've never explored that region before." The commander crossed his arms. "Could be a trap. Who else knows about this?" "It's just us for now," Laura said. "But if it's real, if someone really needs help, we could be the only ones who can reach them in time." Monroe didn't respond immediately. He turned to look out the viewport, where the endless blackness of space stretched beyond the ship. Neutral territory was dangerous, was a buffer zone between rival factions, a place where no one enforced laws or protected travelers. If the Deathworlders ventured into that area, they would be on their own. Still, something about the idea of ignoring a cry for help didn't sit right with him. "Tell me what you think," he said finally, glancing at Laura. "Be honest." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I think we should investigate. If it's legitimate, we could save lives. And if it's not," she shrugged, "we'll deal with it. We always do." Monroe nodded slowly. "Prepare a briefing. I want everyone ready to move within the hour." As the crew scrambled to prepare the ship, Lieutenant Ryan Cole sat alone in the mess hall, picking at a plate of food he wasn't hungry for. Ryan was a soldier through and through, with broad shoulders and calloused hands earned from years of combat. He had seen too many battles, lost too many friends, and carried scars, both visible and invisible. Lately, he'd been feeling restless, like he was waiting for something big to happen. Maybe this was it. Amanda Hayes walked in moments later, carrying a tray of supplies. She was a medic with a kind face and steady hands, though her quiet demeanor often masked her determination. Unlike Ryan, Amanda believed in second chances and doing whatever it took to preserve life even when others thought it was hopeless. She spotted him sitting by himself and joined him at the table. "You heard about the signal?" she asked, setting her tray down. Ryan nodded. "Yeah, Another mission. Probably nothing. Or maybe it's everything, Amanda countered. What if someone really does need our help? He gave her a skeptical look. You always think the best of people, even aliens. And you always expect the worst, she shot back with a smile. Maybe we balance each other out. Before Ryan could respond, the intercom crackled to life. Attention all personnel, came Commander Monroe's voice. Report to the briefing room immediately. They exchanged glances and headed toward the briefing room together. Inside, the rest of the senior staff was already gathered. Monroe stood at the front, his expression unreadable. Behind him, a display showed the same map Laura had shown earlier, along with fragments of the decoded message. This is what we know, Monroe began, cutting straight to the point. An unknown species has sent out a distress signal from deep in neutral territory. Dr. Bennett believes it may be genuine, but we can't rule out the possibility of deception. Our objective is to locate the source of the signal, assess the situation, and determine whether intervention is necessary. Questions? Sergeant Paul Kramer raised his hand. He was a burly man, with a gruff demeanor and a reputation for following orders without question. Sir, why are we risking our necks for strangers? For all we know, this could be a setup by one of our enemies. That's a valid concern, Monroe admitted, which is why we'll proceed with caution. But let me remind you, we're Deathworlders. Surviving impossible odds is what we do. If these aliens are truly in danger, we owe it to ourselves and to them to find out. Kramer scowled but didn't argue further. Laura stepped forward. Addressing the group, based on the fragments we've decoded, the message appears to be a plea for evacuation. Whoever sent it isn't asking for resources or reinforcements, they're begging for salvation. Wait, that suggests they're desperate. Not aggressive. Desperation makes people unpredictable, Ryan muttered under his breath. Monroe caught the comment and nodded. Exactly, which is why we'll maintain a defensive posture at all times. Dismissed. As the crew dispersed, Ryan lingered behind, watching Monroe closely. Permission to speak freely, sir? Always, Monroe replied. Ryan hesitated. Do you really believe this is worth the risk? We don't even know who or what we're dealing with? Monroe met his gaze. I don't know. But I do know that turning away from someone in need goes against everything we stand for. Whether it's humans or aliens, survival means looking out for each other. Sometimes taking a chance is the only way forward. Ryan didn't respond right away. Instead, he nodded and turned to leave. As he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would change everything for better or worse. Back in the control room, Laura continued working on the signal, trying to piece together more of the message. Each new fragment brought her closer to understanding the sender's intent. But as she worked, a nagging thought crept into her mind. What if they weren't supposed to receive this call? What if the signal had been meant for someone else entirely? And unbeknownst to the Deathworlders, their decision to respond would set off a chain of events that neither side could have anticipated. Somewhere far away, the Valeth waited anxiously, unaware that their plea for help had reached the wrong species. And as the Iron Gale powered its engines and set course for the unknown, the fate of two civilizations hung precariously in the balance. The journey to the source of the signal took several days, during which the crew of the Iron Gale prepared for every possible scenario. Commander Jack Monroe spent most of his time on the bridge, reviewing tactical plans and ensuring the ship was ready for anything. Lieutenant Ryan Cole led training exercises with the ground team, drilling them on quick responses and defensive maneuvers. Amanda Hayes stocked medical supplies, her mind racing with questions about the aliens they might encounter. Meanwhile, Dr. Laura Bennett worked tirelessly to decode more of the message, hoping to learn anything that could give them an edge. When they finally arrived at the coordinates, the sight that greeted them was both eerie and beautiful. The planet was bathed in a pale red glow from its dying sun, casting long shadows across its cracked surface. Towering crystalline structures jutted out of the ground like jagged teeth, shimmering faintly as if lit from within. Rivers of molten rock snaked through valleys, releasing clouds of ash into the thin atmosphere. It was clear that this world was on the brink of destruction. This place looks like it's already dead, Ryan muttered as he stared at the view screen. He stood beside Amanda, who looked equally awestruck. "It's not dead yet," she replied. Softly, not completely. "Someone or something is still alive down there." Monroe stepped forward, his voice cutting through the quiet tension on the bridge. "Prepare the landing parties. We'll deploy in 2 teams. Cole, you're leading. Team 1, your job is to locate the source of the signal and assess the situation. Hayes, stay close to Kalul. Handle any medical emergencies. I'll coordinate operations from the ship." Ryan nodded, but his jaw tightened. He didn't like splitting up the crew, especially on such unfamiliar terrain. Still, orders were orders. Within minutes, the teams were geared up and boarding drop pods designed to withstand rough landings. As the pods detached from the iron gale and descended toward the planet's surface, the crew braced themselves for what lay ahead. The landing was rougher than expected. The pods hit the ground hard, kicking up clouds of dust and debris. The doors opened, the air smelled metallic and sharp, stinging their nostrils. Ryan stepped out first, scanning the area with his rifle raised. Behind him, Amanda followed, clutching her medkit tightly. The rest of the team fanned out, keeping watch for signs of movement. At first, everything seemed eerily quiet. The only sounds were the distant rumble of collapsing rocks and the occasional crackle of energy discharges from the crystals nearby. But then, just as they began moving toward the largest structure, a towering spire made of translucent material, they saw them. The Valeth emerged slowly from the shadows, their bodies glowing faintly against the dim light. They were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Their forms were fluid, almost liquid-like, shifting and shimmering as they moved. Their eyes, if they could even be called that, were pools of light that seemed to pulse with emotion. Some carried devices that emitted soft hums, while others held nothing at all. For a moment, no one moved. Humans and Valeth simply stared at each other, separated by a gulf of fear and misunderstanding. Then one of the Valeth stepped forward, raising its arm in what appeared to be a gesture of greeting. Its movements were slow and deliberate, as though trying to convey peace. But to the humans, it didn't look peaceful. To Ryan, it looked like the alien was reaching for a weapon. His finger twitched on the trigger of his rifle. "Hold your fire," he barked, glancing back at his team. "Let's see what they do." Amanda stepped forward cautiously, ignoring Ryan's warning glare. "They don't seem hostile," she said quietly. "Maybe they're trying to communicate." Before anyone could respond, another Valeth moved suddenly, its body rippling as it extended a tendril-like appendage toward the humans. This time Ryan couldn't stop himself. Reacting purely on instinct, he fired a warning shot into the ground near the alien's feet, where its feet should have been. The loud crack of the gunshot echoed through the valley, startling both sides. Panic erupted instantly. The Valeth recoiled, their glowing forms flickering wildly as they scrambled backward. Some emitted high-pitched whistles that sounded almost like cries of alarm. On the human side, the soldiers raised their weapons, forming a tight defensive. "Circle around Amanda. Stand down," Ryan shouted, trying to regain control. But the chaos had already taken hold. One of the younger members of the team, Private Steve Carter, fired blindly at the nearest Valeth, striking it in the chest. The creature collapsed, its light fading rapidly until it went dark. "No," Amanda screamed, rushing forward despite Ryan's protests. She knelt beside the fallen alien, examining it desperately. Its body felt cold and fragile, like glass on the verge of shattering. There was no blood, no visible wound. Just a faint crackling sound as its form dissolved into glittering particles. "What are you doing?" Ryan demanded, pulling her back. "Get behind me." "It didn't attack us," Amanda shot back, tears welling in her eyes. "We attacked them. Look at how scared they are." Ryan hesitated, glancing at the remaining Valeth. They hadn't retaliated, even after being fired upon. Instead, they huddled together, their lights dimming as if in mourning. For the first time, Ryan wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake. Back on the Iron Gale, Commander Monroe watched the scene unfold through the helmet cameras of the ground team. His face hardened as he listened to the panicked voices over the comms. "This isn't going according to plan," Laura said nervously, standing beside him. Should we intervene? Monroe clenched his fists. Not yet. Cole knows what he's doing. Let's see how he handles this. On the surface, Ryan struggled to regain order. He ordered Carter to holster his weapon and address the Valeth directly, speaking slowly and clearly. "We mean no harm," he said, though he doubted they understood him. "We came to help." One of the Valeth stepped forward again, its movements hesitant. It raised its hand once more, this time holding a small device that emitted a series of pulsating lights. Ryan froze, unsure whether to interpret it as a threat or an attempt to communicate. Before he could decide, Amanda spoke up. "Wait," she pleaded. "It's trying to talk to us." "Right." Ryan glanced at her, torn between caution and curiosity. Finally, he lowered his rifle slightly. "Fine, but everyone stays alert." The Valeth continued, signaling with the device, its lights flashing in rhythmic patterns. Laura, monitoring the footage from the ship, recognized the sequence immediately. "It's repeating part of the distress call," she exclaimed. "There, confirming their identity?" Monroe wasted no time. "Patch me through to Cole's channel now." Seconds later, Ryan's earpiece crackled to life. "Cole, stand down. The aliens aren't hostile." "Pete, they are not hostile." Ryan exhaled sharply, lowering his weapon fully. "Understood, sir." Baird. Turning to his team, he gave the order to lower their rifles. The tension in the air eased slightly. Though the mistrust lingered, Amanda approached the Valeth cautiously, holding out her hands to show she was unarmed. The alien tilted its head, studying her with those luminous eyes. After a moment, it reached out tentatively, touching her palm with one of its tendrils. The contact sent a warm sensation through her skin, accompanied by a flood of images flashes. Of their dying planet, their desperate attempts to send the signal, and their hope for rescue. "They're asking for help," Amanda whispered, overwhelmed by the emotions she was experiencing. "They're running out of time." Ryan frowned, stepping closer. "How do you know that?" I just do," she replied, struggling to explain. "It's like they're showing me. Their sun is collapsing, and they can't survive much longer." The gravity of the situation hit Ryan like a punch to the gut. He turned to his team, his voice firm but tinged with regret. "We screwed up, big time. These people, we thought they were attacking us, but they were just trying to survive. And now we've got a chance to make it right." As the humans and Valeth stood together under the shadow of the crumbling spire, a fragile truce began to form.
Ow.
But the damage had already been done. Trust would take time to rebuild, and time was something neither side had in abundance. The fragile truce between the humans and the Valeth was tenuous at best. Back on the Iron Gale, Commander Jack Monroe listened to the reports coming in from the surface. The situation was more complicated than anyone had anticipated. Weren't hostile, but their planet was dying faster than expected. Every moment counted, and the Deathworlders needed a plan fast. Dr. Laura Bennett worked tirelessly in the ship's lab, analyzing data from the alien devices and piecing together fragments of the Valeth language. She replayed recordings of their light patterns over and over, searching for meaning. Her breakthrough came late into the night when she realized the patterns weren't random. They were sentences, written in bursts of color and rhythm. Slowly, she began decoding them. "They're asking for evacuation," Laura told Monroe, as they stood in the briefing room. "Their sun is collapsing, and they don't have much time left. They sent out that signal hoping someone would come and save them." Monroe rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the decision ahead. "Evacuation? Do we even know how many of them there are?" "Thousands? Maybe millions," Laura replied. "But it's not just about numbers. Their biology is completely different from ours. They can't survive in normal Earth-like conditions. If we try to bring them aboard without proper preparation, they'll die." Monroe frowned. "We don't have the resources to create an entire habitat for them. Not here. Not now." Laura hesitated, then offered a suggestion. "What if we convert parts of the ship? We could modify cargo bays or unused sections too. Mimic their environment. It wouldn't be perfect, but it might buy us enough time to find a safer solution." Monroe nodded slowly. "It's risky, but But if we don't act, they'll all die anyway. Start working on the modifications.
Ow.
Assign engineers to help you. While Laura focused on solving the technical challenges, tensions simmered among the crew. Some, like Sergeant Paul Kramer, argued that helping the Valeth was a waste of time and resources. We're risking our lives for strangers who might not even survive the trip, he grumbled during a heated discussion in the mess hall. Why should we care what happens to them? Amanda Hayes, sitting across from him, shot back immediately. Because it's the right thing to do. They're alive, just like us. Doesn't that mean something? Kramer sneered. Right thing. It's out here, survival is the only thing that matters. You think those aliens would hesitate to leave us behind if the roles were reversed? Before Amanda could respond, Ryan Cole stepped in. He'd been listening silently until now, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. Maybe they would, he said evenly. Maybe they wouldn't, but we're not them. We decide who we are based on what we do. If we walk away, what does that make us? Kramer glared at him but didn't argue further. The room fell silent, the weight of Ryan's words hanging heavy in the air. Meanwhile, down on the planet's surface, Amanda continued trying to build trust with the Valeth. Through trial and error, and with the help of the images they shared telepathically, she learned more about their culture and struggles. One young Valeth named Kellis seemed particularly drawn to her. Whenever she approached, Kellis would extend its tendrils toward her, projecting calming sensations and flashes of memory. He's showing me their history. Amanda explained to Ryan one evening as they reviewed the day's events. They've lived here for thousands of years, building cities and creating art. But their sun started fading centuries ago, and they've been fighting to survive ever since. Ryan shook his head in disbelief. All this time they've been holding on by a thread, and we almost made it worse. Amanda placed a hand on his shoulder. You didn't know. None of us did. What matters now is fixing it. Back aboard the Iron Gale, Laura and her team worked around the clock to prepare the biodomes. Engineers welded panels, installed filtration systems, and calibrated temperature controls to match the Valeth's needs. Supplies were diverted from storage, and volunteers pitched in wherever they could. Despite the urgency, morale remained high. For the first time in a long while, the crew felt united by a common purpose. But not everyone shared their optimism. As the days passed, Kramer grew increasingly vocal about his doubts. He gathered a small group of like-minded soldiers, spreading whispers of dissent. This mission is a distraction, he told them. Should focus on getting ourselves home, not playing nursemaid to some glowing jellyfish. His words reached Monroe, who called him into the command center for a private meeting. I hear you've been stirring up trouble, Monroe said bluntly, his tone leaving no room for excuses. Kramer straightened, meeting the commander's gaze. Just telling the truth, sir. This operation is putting us at risk for no good reason. And whose job is it to decide what's worth the risk? Monroe countered. Yours or mine? Kramer clenched his jaw but said nothing. You swore. An oath, Monroe continued, his voice hardening. To follow orders and protect your crew. That includes doing whatever it takes to get the job done, even if it means helping people who aren't like us. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Kramer muttered reluctantly. Good. Now get back to work. Despite Monroe's efforts to maintain order, the tension aboard the ship persisted. It came to a head when Ryan returned from another scouting mission with grim news. There are survivors scattered across the planet, he reported during a debriefing session.
Some are trapped structures.
Others are too weak to move. We need more teams on the ground to bring them in.
Monroe nodded. How? Many? At least 3 or 4? Ryan replied. But we'll need better equipment. The terrain is brutal, and the air quality keeps getting worse. We'll send reinforcements, Monroe promised. Then, turning to Laura, he added, How soon will the biodomes be ready? Another day, she answered. Maybe 2. But we can start transferring the healthiest Valeth as soon as the first dome is operational. Do it, Monroe ordered. Time isn't on our side. As preparations continued, Ryan found himself spending more time with Kellis. The young Valeth seemed to sense his unease, and often sought him out, projecting soothing images of calm oceans and starry skies. One evening, as they sat together near the base camp, Kellis extended a tendril toward Ryan's hand. Hesitantly, he allowed the contact, bracing himself for the rush of emotions he'd seen Amanda experience. Instead, he felt warmth, a gentle, comforting sensation that filled him with a strange sense of peace. Flashes of memory followed, scenes of Kellis' childhood, playing in fields of crystal flowers, moments of laughter shared with family, and finally, the sorrow of watching their world crumble around them. They trusted us. Ryan murmured aloud, though no one else was nearby. Even after everything, they still trust us. When he returned to the ship later that night, he carried that trust with him. Sharing what he'd learned with Amanda and Laura, he emphasized the importance of moving quickly. Every second counts, he said firmly. If we don't act now, we'll lose them. By the third day, the first biodome was complete. Laura supervised as the initial group of Valeth was carefully transported aboard the Iron Gale. Each step of the process was nerve-wracking, as any mistake could prove fatal. But when the final alien was secured inside the dome, the relief was palpable. The Valeth pulsed softly, their lights brightening as they adjusted to their new surroundings. "It's working," Laura whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "There. Stable." Monroe watched the scene unfold on the monitors, a rare smile crossing his face. "Good work, everyone. Now let's keep going." As the rescue operation expanded, so did the bond between the humans and the Valeth. Through gestures, images, and shared determination, they began to understand each other, not perfectly, but enough to cooperate. Even Kramer softened slightly, though he still kept his distance. Yet beneath the surface, challenges remained. Planet's instability worsened, with frequent tremors threatening to collapse entire regions. Supplies aboard the Iron Gale were running low, and fatigue was setting in among the crew. But despite the odds, they pressed on, driven by a shared belief that giving up wasn't an option. For the first time in their lives, the Deathworlders weren't just surviving, they were saving others. And in doing so, they discovered a strength they hadn't known they possessed. The rescue operation was in full swing, but the challenges kept piling up. Commander Jack Monroe stood on the bridge of the Iron Gale, staring at the holographic displays showing the progress of the mission. The first biodome had been a success, stabilizing the initial group of Valeth survivors, but there were still thousands more scattered across the dying planet. And time was slipping away faster than anyone had anticipated. Dr. Laura Bennett worked tirelessly alongside her team, converting additional sections of the ship into biodomes. Each conversion required precision and creativity, as they had to mimic the exact conditions needed for the Valeth survival. Temperature, humidity, air composition, every detail mattered. Supplies were stretched thin, and fatigue weighed heavily on everyone involved. Yet despite the exhaustion, Laura refused to slow down. She knew that every second counted. "We're running out of materials." One of the engineers warned her during a late-night shift. "If we keep this pace, we won't have enough to finish the last dome." Laura sighed, rubbing her temples. "Then we'll improvise. Use whatever you can find. We can't stop now." Back on the surface, Lieutenant Ryan Cole led another scouting mission, searching for pockets of survivors hidden in the ruins. The terrain was treacherous, with jagged rocks, unstable ground, and rivers of molten lava cutting through the landscape. Dust storms swept through without warning, reducing visibility to almost nothing. It was a miracle anyone could survive here at all, let alone an entire species. Amanda Hayes accompanied Ryan on these missions, her medical skills proving invaluable. She treated injuries sustained by both humans and Valeth alike, often working under impossible conditions. Her presence brought a sense of calm to the chaos, earning her respect from both sides. Even Khalees, the young Valeth who had formed a bond with Ryan, seemed drawn to her kindness. During one particularly grueling mission, Ryan and his team discovered a group of Valeth trapped inside a collapsed structure. The entrance was blocked by massive chunks of debris, and the air inside was growing thinner by the minute. Using heavy equipment brought from the ship, they worked together with the Valeth to clear the rubble. It was slow, dangerous work, but eventually they managed to free the survivors. as the rescued Valeth emerged. Their lights flickered weakly, signaling their gratitude. One of them, a frail elder, projected images directly into Ryan's mind. He saw flashes of their history, ancient cities built from crystal, celebrations under twin moons, and finally, the devastation wrought by their dying son. The message was clear. They were grateful, but they also feared it might be too late. They're losing hope, Ryan told Amanda later as they rested near the base camp. Even if we save them, they don't think they'll make it. Amanda nodded thoughtfully. Hope is fragile, especially when everything around you is falling apart. But we can't give up. Not yet. Ryan glanced at Kellis, who hovered nearby, watching them silently. Maybe he's why I keep going. Every time I look at him, I see potential. If we can save them, maybe they'll have a chance to rebuild. The Iron Gale, tensions simmered among the crew. Sergeant Paul Kramer's earlier complaints had evolved into outright hostility. He believed the mission was diverting resources away from their own survival, and he wasn't shy about voicing his opinions. His words found traction with a small faction of soldiers who shared his concerns. "This isn't our fight," Kramer argued during a heated discussion in the mess hall. "We're risking our lives for aliens who can't even thank us properly. What happens when we run out of food or fuel? Who's going to save us then?" Ryan overheard the conversation and stepped in, his voice low but firm. "If we turn our backs on them, what does that say about us?" "We're better than this, Kramer. Or at least I thought we were." Kramer sneered. "Easy for you to say. You've got your pet alien to keep you company." Before Ryan could respond, Amanda intervened. "It's not about taking sides. It's about doing what's right. These people are dying, and we're the only ones who can help them. Isn't that worth something?" Kramer didn't answer, but his scowl deepened. As the argument ended, Ryan pulled Amanda aside. "He's dangerous," he said quietly. "He keeps pushing. Others might start listening." Amanda frowned. "What do you want me to do? Convince him to change his mind?" "No," Ryan replied. "Just stay close to the crew. Keep an eye on things. If he tries anything, we need to know." Meanwhile, Commander Monroe faced his own struggles. Balancing the needs of the Valeth with those of his crew was becoming increasingly difficult. Supplies were dwindling, and morale was beginning to waver. Some members of the crew questioned whether the mission was worth the cost, while others remained steadfast in their determination to see it through. Monroe called a meeting with his senior staff to address the growing unrest. "I know this hasn't been easy," he began, pacing back and forth, "but we're Deathworlders. We adapt. We endure. And right now that means finding a way to save these people." "What happens when we can't?" asked one of the officers. "When the supplies run out, or the ship starts falling apart. Do we abandon the mission then?" Monroe stopped pacing and looked directly at the speaker. "We don't abandon anyone, not unless there's no other choice. Until that moment comes, we keep moving forward." His words resonated with some, but not all. Later that evening, Laura approached him in private. "Sir, the crew is reaching its limit. If something doesn't change soon, we could face mutiny." Nodded grimly. "I know, but we can't afford to slow down." "Not now." Laura hesitated before speaking again. "There might be another option. If we could locate a nearby habitable moon or asteroid, we could use it as a temporary refuge for the Valeth. It wouldn't solve everything, but it would take some pressure off the ship." Monroe considered her suggestion. "Do we have any candidates?" "There's a moon orbiting the 5th planet in this system," Laura replied. "Preliminary scans suggest it has a stable atmosphere and water sources. It's not ideal, but it could work." "Start running simulations," Monroe ordered. "If it's viable, we'll send a team to scout it out." The next day, Ryan volunteered to lead the scouting mission to the moon. Alongside a small team of engineers and scientists, he boarded a shuttle and set course for the distant world. The journey took several hours, during which they analyzed data and prepared for every possible scenario. When they arrived, the sight was breathtaking. The moon's surface was covered in lush forests and shimmering lakes, bathed in soft golden light from its parent planet. Initial scans confirmed that the atmosphere was breathable and the temperature was moderate. It wasn't perfect, but it was livable. This could work, Ryan said, stepping onto the surface and taking a deep breath. With some modifications, we could bring the Valeth here. The team spent the next few hours conducting tests, collecting samples, and mapping potential settlement areas. By the time they returned to the Iron Gale, they had a solid plan in place. Monroe listened intently as Ryan presented their findings. It's not a permanent solution, Ryan admitted. But it buys us time, enough to figure out what comes next. Monroe nodded approvingly. Good work. Start preparing the transfer protocols. We'll begin relocating the Valeth as soon as possible. As the news spread throughout the ship, a renewed sense of purpose swept through the crew. Even Kramer seemed less vocal in his objections, though his resentment lingered beneath the surface. For the first time in days, hope felt tangible, but the mission was far from over. Challenges still loomed ahead, and the stakes were higher than ever. Yet as the Deathworlders pressed on, driven by a shared determination to protect life human, or otherwise they proved that even in the darkest moments, compassion could shine through. The plan to relocate the Valeth to the habitable moon was ambitious, but it gave the crew of the Iron Gale a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in days, there was hope that they might actually pull this off. Commander Jack Monroe oversaw every detail, ensuring that nothing was left to chance. The clock was ticking. The dying planet below them wasn't going to wait. Dr. Laura Bennett coordinated with the engineering team to finalize the transfer protocols. Each step had to be precise, transporting the Valeth from their biodomes. Aboard the ship, to temporary shelters on the moon required careful planning. The atmosphere on the moon was breathable for humans, but the Valeth were far more delicate. Portable environmental units were constructed to maintain their fragile conditions during transit. We'll need volunteers to help set up the shelters, Laura announced during a briefing. It's going to be tough work and we can't afford. Any mistakes? Ryan Cole immediately stepped forward. I'll lead the ground team. We've seen what this place is capable of, and I know how to handle it. Amanda Hayes joined him without hesitation. Count me in too. If anything goes wrong, we'll need medical support ready. Monroe nodded approvingly. Good catcher? Team's ready. You leave at dawn. As preparations continued, tensions aboard the ship reached a boiling point. Sergeant Paul Kramer, who had been simmering with resentment for days, finally snapped. He gathered a small group of like-minded soldiers late one night in an unused storage bay. This mission is killing us, Kramer hissed, pacing back and forth. We're running out of food, fuel, and patience. How long until we collapse under the weight of saving someone else's species? One of the soldiers hesitated, but sir, Commander Monroe gave orders. Orders. Shh, Kramer interrupted sharply. Orders don't matter if we're dead because of them. It's time someone stood up and said enough is enough. His words struck a chord with the others, though not all of them agreed. Some shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other nervously. Still, Kramer pressed on. If we sabotage the biodomes, they'll have no choice but to abandon the mission. It's the only way to save ourselves. The next morning, chaos erupted. Alarms blared throughout the Iron Gale as reports came in of critical failures in 2 of the biodomes. The systems regulating temperature and air composition had been tampered with, causing dangerous fluctuations. Dozens of Valeth inside began to weaken rapidly, their lights dimming as their bodies struggled to adapt. Laura rushed to the scene, her heart pounding. What happened? She demanded, scanning the damaged equipment. It looks deliberate, one of the engineers replied. Grimly, someone messed with the controls. Monroe arrived moments later, his face dark with anger. Find out who did this, now. While investigations began, Amanda worked alongside Laura to stabilize the affected Valeth. They moved quickly, adjusting settings manually and administering emergency measures to keep the aliens alive. It was exhausting, stressful work, but they refused to give up. Ryan, meanwhile, led a search for the saboteurs. Started with Kramer, whose reputation for dissent made him a prime suspect. When confronted, Kramer didn't deny his involvement. Instead, he defended his actions with cold logic You think I wanted to hurt anyone? He growled. This isn't about them, it's about us. We're risking everything for strangers who can't even thank us properly. What happens when we run out of resources? Who's going to save us then? Ryan clenched his fists, fighting. The urge to lash out? You don't get to decide who lives or dies. That's not your call. Kramer smirked. Maybe not. But you'll see him right. Before Ryan could respond, alarms sounded again. This time they signaled an external threat. A massive tremor shook the planet below, triggering avalanches of debris that threatened the remaining Valeth settlements. The rescue teams still on the surface were in immediate danger. Get everyone back to the shuttles, Monroe ordered over the comms. We can't afford to lose anyone else. Ryan and his team scrambled to evacuate the stranded survivors. Dust clouds choked the air, making visibility nearly impossible. Rocks tumbled down from cliffs, forcing them to take cover repeatedly. Through sheer determination, they managed to guide the last group of Valeth to safety just as the ground beneath them began to crack open. Back aboard the Iron Gale, the situation remained dire. Repairs to the biodomes were underway, but progress was slow. Exhaustion weighed heavily on the crew, and tempers flared. Even those who hadn't supported Kramer's sabotage began to question whether they could truly succeed. Monroe called another meeting, addressing the entire crew directly. I know this mission has pushed us to our limits, he said, his voice steady despite the fatigue etched into his face. But we're Deathworlders. We survive because we refuse to quit. Every one of you knows what it means to fight against impossible odds. Right now, these people, the Valeth, are counting on us. Are we really going to let them down? The room fell silent. Slowly, heads began to nod. Even some of Kramer's followers looked ashamed. We'll make this work, Monroe continued. Together, no matter what it takes. Inspired by his words, the crew redoubled their efforts. Engineers worked around the clock to repair the biodomes. Volunteers helped prepare the moon's surface for the incoming refugees. Supplies were rationed carefully, and rest periods were shortened to maximize productivity. Despite the challenges, a sense of unity began to emerge. During one particularly grueling shift, Ryan found himself alone with Khalees, the young Valeth, who had become a symbol of hope for both species. The alien's light flickered weakly, a sign of stress from the recent events. Ryan knelt beside him, placing a hand gently near his translucent form. You've been through so much, Ryan murmured, but you're strong. You'll make it. Khalees responded by projecting calming images into Ryan's mind scenes of peaceful landscapes and bright stars. For a moment, Ryan allowed himself to feel a sliver of peace amidst the turmoil. When the repairs were finally complete, the first wave of Valeth was transported to the moon. Temporary shelters had been constructed, equipped with portable environmental units to mimic their home conditions. As the survivors stepped onto the new terrain, their lights brightened slightly. Signaling relief and gratitude, Laura watched from a distance, tears streaming down her face. They're safe, she whispered. For now, they're safe. Amanda joined her, smiling despite her exhaustion. We did it. Hundreds of Valeth remained on the dying planet, and time was running out. The tremors grew worse, destabilizing entire regions. Rescue missions became increasingly dangerous, forcing the crew to make difficult decisions about which areas to prioritize. Monroe addressed the senior staff. 1. Final time before launching the last phase of the operation. This is it, he said solemnly. Whatever happens next, we've already accomplished something incredible. Let's finish strong. The Deathworlders prepared for the final push. They knew the risks. Sacrifices would have to be made, and not everyone would come back. But they also knew that giving up wasn't an option, not when lives depended on them. On the surface of the dying planet, Ryan led the last group of rescuers into the heart of the chaos. Dust storms raged around them, and the ground quaked violently beneath their feet. Yet they pressed on, driven by a shared belief that compassion and courage could overcome even the darkest odds. And somewhere, deep within the crumbling ruins, a faint light pulsed a reminder that hope, however fragile, could endure. The final push to save the remaining Valeth was a race against time. The planet's surface was crumbling, and the tremors were growing stronger with each passing hour. Now rocks tumbled down from cliffs, rivers of molten lava surged unpredictably, and clouds of ash choked the air. Despite the danger, Lieutenant Ryan Cole led his team deeper into the chaos, determined to bring back every survivor they could find. Commander Jack Monroe stayed aboard the Iron Gale, coordinating efforts between the rescue teams on the ground and the support crews on the moon. His voice crackled over the comms, calm but firm. "Report your positions. We need to know where everyone is." Ryan responded immediately, his breath ragged from exertion. "We're in Sector 4. Found a group of about 20 survivors trapped. Under debris, it's slow going, but we'll get them out." "Copy that," Monroe replied. "Just stay safe. If things get too risky, pull back." Ryan glanced at the collapsing structures around him and shook his head. "Not an option." "Sir, not this time." Amanda Hayes worked tirelessly alongside the rescue team, treating injuries and stabilizing weakened Valith as they were freed from the rubble. Her hands moved quickly, her focus unshakable despite the chaos surrounding her. Second, counted Dan that failure wasn't something she could afford, as the last of the trapped Valith were pulled free. The ground beneath them shuddered violently. A massive fissure opened up just meters away, swallowing chunks of rock and sending plumes of smoke into the air. Ryan grabbed Amanda's arm, pulling her back just in time to avoid being caught in the collapse. "We need to move now," shouted, ushering the survivors toward the shuttle. The journey back to the landing zone was harrowing. Tremors threw them off balance, and falling debris forced them to take cover repeatedly. But somehow, they made it. As the shuttle lifted off, Ryan looked out the viewport at the devastated landscape below. The planet was dying, its once beautiful spires reduced to jagged ruins. He felt a pang of sadness for the world they were leaving behind, but also relief that they had saved as many lives as they could. Back on the Iron Gale, the crew worked feverishly to prepare for the final transport to the moon. Dr. Laura Bennett oversaw the loading of the last biodomes, ensuring that every Valith was stable before departure. Supplies were stretched thin, and exhaustion hung heavy in the air, but no one complained. They were too close to give up now. Sergeant Paul Kramer watched silently from the shadows, his earlier rebellion replaced by a quiet resignation. He hadn't spoken since being confronted by Ryan. Though he still harbored doubts about the mission, he couldn't deny the determination of his fellow crew members. When a call went out for volunteers to help secure the remaining shuttles, he stepped forward without a word. Monroe noticed Kramer's change in attitude but didn't comment. Instead, he simply nodded in acknowledgement. "Good to see you pitching in," he said briefly, before turning back to the task at hand by the time the last shuttle docked with the Iron Gale.
Ow.
The ship was overcrowded but functional. Every available space had been converted into temporary quarters or storage areas, and the hum of activity filled the corridors. Yet there was a sense of accomplishment, a shared understanding that they had done everything possible to save the Valith. Once all the survivors were safely aboard, Monroe gave the order to set course for the moon.
Ow.
The journey took several hours, during which the crew allowed themselves a rare moment of rest. Some slept, while others sat quietly, reflecting on what they had endured. For many, it was hard to believe they had succeeded. When they arrived, the sight of the moon's lush forests and shimmering lakes brought a wave of relief. Temporary shelters had been set up, complete with environmental units to maintain the Valith's delicate conditions. As the survivors disembarked, their lights flickered brightly, signaling gratitude and hope. Kayla's, the young Valith who had bonded with Ryan, approached him one last time before joining the others. Through telepathic images, he conveyed a message of thanks not just for saving his life, but for proving that compassion could transcend differences. Ryan placed a hand near Khalees's translucent form, feeling a warmth that lingered long after. The alien moved away. Laura stood nearby, watching the scene unfold. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the magnitude of what they had achieved. "We did it," she whispered. "Against all odds, we actually did it." Monroe joined her, his expression softer than usual. "Yes, we did." and not because we had to, but because it was the right thing to do. Amanda nodded, standing beside them. This changes everything. It's not just for them, but for us too. We've shown that even Deathworlders can choose kindness over survival. As the Valeth settled into their new home, the crew of the Iron Gale began preparations for their departure. The moon wouldn't be a permanent solution. It lacked the resources needed to sustain such a large population indefinitely, but it bought time. Time for the Valeth to recover, to rebuild, perhaps someday find a new world to call their own. Before leaving, Monroe addressed the crew one final time. What we've done here, it's more than a mission. It's proof that we're capable of greatness, not just as individuals, but as a team. Remember this moment. Carry it with you wherever you go. The words resonated deeply, especially among those who had doubted the mission at first. Even Kramer seemed affected, standing quietly at the back of the room with a thoughtful expression. As the Iron Gale powered its engines and left the moon behind, the crew looked out at the stars. Ahead, they were battered and weary, their supplies depleted and their bodies pushed to the limit. But they were alive. So were the Valeth. For Ryan, the experience had changed him in ways he couldn't fully articulate. He thought about Kellis, about the bond they had formed despite their differences. He thought about Amanda's unwavering belief in doing the right thing and Laura's relentless determination to decode the unknown. Most of all, he thought about Commander Monroe's leadership, how he had chosen compassion over pragmatism. Even when it seemed impossible days later, as the ship drifted through the vast emptiness of space, Ryan found himself sitting alone in the mess hall. Amanda joined him, carrying 2 cups of steaming coffee. She handed one to him with a smile. "You look like you're thinking too much," she teased gently. He chuckled, taking a sip. "Maybe, just wondering what comes next," she leaned back in her chair, gazing out the viewport. "Who knows? But whatever it is, I think we're ready for it." He nodded slowly, feeling a spark of optimism ignite within him. For the first time in a long while, he believed her. Far away on the habitable moon, the Valeth began to rebuild. Their lights pulsed softly in the twilight, casting a warm glow across the forest floor. Though their future remained uncertain, they carried with them the memory of a species that had chosen to help them, a species called the Deathworlders. And somewhere, deep in the hearts of both humans and aliens alike, a seed of hope took root, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the universe, acts of kindness could light the way forward.